Hello, I'm Nina Lockwood. I'm the founder and chief exec of Intuitive Talent Solutions. We're a boutique executive search agency focused on the UK transport and logistics sector, connecting senior executives to the roles that really matter. Welcome to my podcast, Intuitive Insights. I'm delighted that you could join me. On today's episode, I am joined in conversation with Richard Brown. Richard has had 4 decades of experience in the UK rail industry. He was part of the leadership team that brought British Rail's Intercity back into profit in the 1980s and was also responsible for leading the transformation of Eurostar into a high-performing railway in the 2000s. Richard shares his insights, his advice, and his knowledge with us so freely in this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed every minute, and I am confident that you will take something from it too. I appreciate you being here. Thank you and enjoy. Richard Brown, hello and welcome. A very warm welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast. It is my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome you. I think railway legend would be a title that you're probably not comfortable with, but one which is well justified.
Oh, yeah.
So welcome.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here as well.
I am so keen to give you the platform to share your career story, and also to share some of the experiences that you've had, which I believe are super relevant for the leaders in the industry as we currently stand, just coming into, as we're recording this today, in the first working week back into 2026. So a brand new year ahead of us. Lots of opportunity, but also lots of challenge in the UK railway. And I know without a doubt that there's going to be lots of wisdom and information and experience that you have to share, which is going to be super interesting and really relevant to the people who are tuning in. Before I hand the kind of the mic over to you, so to speak, a little bit of context for the people who are tuning in. I had been aware of you. We hadn't met, but I'd very much been aware of you by reputation. And then last year, it was brought to my attention that you'd published a book, your memoirs and insights. So the Changing Times and Changing Trains. Richard, I've absolutely loved reading this book. I've found it thoroughly interesting. It's given me a brilliant context to the history of the railway, which I am really interested in, and I've spent the last 13 years now immersing myself in, but it's been a real eye-opener from an operating perspective of what it's been like for you as you've gone through your career. And your final chapter in particular in that book, where you share your advice and your thoughts in relation to what comes next, which obviously we're hoping to get more of that during this conversation today. So without further ado, it has been a lengthy career with over 4 decades of your career. I'd like you to give us a whistle-stop tour, if you would, if there is such a thing, in relation to how did you get into railways in the first place, and where did you go and where did you end up? Over to you.
Okay. How did I get in the first place? I say by chance, because I had no ambition to join the railways. There's no family history. I went on what we used to call the milk round, finishing degree at university, applied for jobs, mostly in transport. And I was offered 2 other jobs, but at the time, British Rail just sort of struck me. This looks more interesting. I thought I could build a career in this industry. I could see myself working here long term. And I was particularly struck by 2 people I met, the chair of the selection panel and the younger manager who was there just to sort of tell people what it was like as a trainee. So it was by chance, and I've never had any regrets. It's been a great industry.
Yeah.
And I think I was very lucky. After my so-called training, there wasn't much training. It was mostly observing and getting out and about and trying to understand a bit more about how the railway worked. I joined Freightliner which was then a subsidiary of British Rail. Had 4 jobs in 5 years there. The then MD, a guy called Cyril Bleasdale, I think he didn't quite take me under his wing, but I mean, he was prepared to push the boat out, and he created jobs for me, actually. My very first job there, he created, and sort of oversaw me moving on really quite quickly, and challenged me. I think I didn't realize it at the time, but he was prepared to take risks on young people, give them a challenge and move on.
Yeah.
So it was a great place to start. Then I came back to the mainstream BR, and end up as the planning manager of Intercity, which was then sort of one of the new business divisions of British Rail. Had 11 years there, and went from planning manager with a team of, it was just me and 2 other people, to being director of one of the Intercity profit centres when Intercity and the railway was reorganised into vertical integrated profit centres. So again, lucky break to be in the right place at the right time, but also with bosses who were prepared to take a risk and move you on when perhaps you weren't entirely ready. Privatization, I set up and saw through privatization one of the train operating companies, what was then Midland Main Line. Joined National Express. We did a management buyout bid, which thankfully failed. I don't think it was a successful business model for railways, actually. Joined National Express and had a great time initially, because they believed in appointing a management team, agreeing a business plan, and then letting people get on with it. And the freedom and the trust that they gave was really very empowering. But it sort of slowly didn't melt away, but changed over time. They promoted me to run their trains division and then onto the board as commercial director. And I was further and further away from what I would call the sharp end. Various reasons. Anyway, I was made redundant from that in the end, which was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, actually. And joined Eurostar as chief executive a few months later. And was at Eurostar for 11 and a half years. So that's my sort of operating career, but I also had the privilege of being on several industry boards, particularly, well, as I moved on from Eurostar, I was actually on the board of the Department for Transport. I think I was the only person on that board who had ever run a transport operation. That was more of a
interesting
advisory board. It was very interesting, very frustrating, quite privileged to be there, but you were a spectator. You weren't a player.
Right.
I was on the board of Network Rail and of HS2, so been around quite a long time. But at each stage, I think I consider myself lucky to have been in the right place and to have had bosses who were prepared to take a risk on me.
Yeah. This is really interesting, Richard, because you've mentioned the word lucky or luck maybe 4 or 5 times just in this opening kind of part of our conversation. And I remember having a conversation with Andy Lord, Chief Commissioner at TfL, quite a while now, a couple of years ago, on the podcast, and Andy used the word luck quite a lot as well. And I kind of played it back to him as I'm going to play it back to you, and say, can we just dig a bit deeper on that? Lucky, being in the right place at the right time. What can we rely on luck, or is there something else? Were you doing something else? Was something else going on? How do you get to be in the right place at the right time? So for people just starting their career now or a few years into it, how do they get to be in the right place at the right time?
That's a big question. I mean, I think there is an attitude of mind that if you consider yourself lucky, you're probably more likely to move on and do better.
Yeah.
I think it's partly that you don't wallow and dwell on bad luck and things that go wrong. You try and learn from it and move on quickly, but you also are thankful for the good luck you've had. So I think it's partly an attitude of mind.
Yes, I agree.
How do you get to be in the right place at the right time? I mean, I think that is more luck, actually. Certainly, I think choosing who you work for, choosing the organization or your boss is actually an underrated importance.
Yes.
And I mean, for instance, I left Freightliners because we had a new MD who took over from Cyril Bleasdale, who I didn't really feel was particularly appreciating what I did or taking much interest.
Okay.
And when the opportunity came to move, I thought, well, I better move if
Mm.
that. So I think it's much harder when you're young and inexperienced and more junior, but you do, I think, need to consider for whom and where you're working, and try and, if you like, sort of hitch your colours to a more outgoing, supportive, successful team.
Yes, do you know, I agreed so much with that statement. And when in the kind of in the day job, when we are, me and my team are prepping people for interviews for senior level jobs with organisations in the transport industry, we always make the point that as a candidate, the interview is as much about you deciding whether you want to work for that organisation and for that individual as it is for the client organisation to be choosing whether you're the right candidate or not. It very much has to be a two-way conversation.
Absolutely.
And an appeal and advantage from both sides, doesn't it? And that is such a good point, and I think one which is underestimated, actually. I agree with you, because it's critical. And sometimes that, I think, just to be clear, what I don't think either of us are suggesting that we only can work with people that we get on with or that we like. I know personally that I had some advice many, many years ago now, which when it was first given to me, how it was positioned, I had a bit of a kind of backward step because I kind of thought, what does that mean? But I had an advisor at one point who said to me, when you are interviewing people, you've got to consider how attractive they are. And I had a bit of a, oh, hang on, what does that mean? And he went on to explain to me that, right, Nina, if you were getting onto a train at Preston and you were travelling to London, you'd got, 2 odd hours on the train, and your seat reservation, when you walked down the carriage, you realised that you were going to be sitting next to that person for 2 hours and 12 minutes on your way down to London. How would you feel? How would you feel about sharing that journey with that person for a couple of hours? Because that's a good test. It's kind of, could you sit with them and have a conversation? How would that feel? So that kind of measure of, not necessarily do I like them, and, I'm not saying we want to, go on a night out together or, go away for a weekend, but could I sit there and spend a couple of hours with them in their company? Would I find them interesting? Would I find them engaging? So it's a really good point, and not one that as anybody has ever brought up on this on this podcast conversation before.
And the flip side, of course, is if you are interviewing and recruiting, you need to be selling yourself and your organization in the same way.
Yes.
It is exactly a two-way process.
Yes, I agree.
And
completely.
I'm afraid too often it's not quite that two-way process. It's assumed if somebody's applied, they want the job, not
Yes.
necessarily. And if they've applied and not thought about it, they're probably not the right person.
No, indeed.
You do want people who've got a choice,
Yes,
because they're probably better than average.
absolutely. I agree. I completely agree. So, you've spent over 4 decades running railways through multiple policy and structural regimes. Looking at the creation of Great British Railways, so we're heading into a very different landscape for UK Railway. I would love to hear from you, Richard, in terms of what lessons from past reforms do you think the current industry must apply if it's going to be successful?
Gosh, that's a huge question.
Another big
I
question. Yeah.
I think the sort of the two things that stand out from me for the scale of change that GBR now faces, uh, comparable to the times of British Rail. I mean, one was, and I'm talking about the evolution of BR's organisation, which I described in the book,
Right.
from a regionally based, siloed organization to vertically integrated profit centers. Each step was an evolution from the previous step.
Mm.
And there was a lot of effort went in, not as part of the organization, but actually as part of trying to sort of change the culture of the organization, investing in total quality management, leadership training, and also in safety management after the appalling accident at Clapham Junction. I think those things sort of created a common language and created a sort of shared culture across the industry. Not shared universally, but pretty widely, particularly for those people who were driving the change. So I think investing in, whether you call it training, team building, culture change, it's a sort of combination of those things, I think is going to be really important, because GBR will be bringing people together from quite a wide range of different cultural backgrounds.
Yes.
Network Rail still carries some of the culture of rail track. It's quite siloed, like British Rail was. You've then got train operating companies, and that the teams there would have been used to different cultures according to their ownership. You've got people coming to the Department for Transport, and so on. So I think I would never underestimate the challenge of sort of building, as I say, a sort of a shared language and a shared common purpose. So that would be number one. And I think the second one, from the evolution of BR's organization, the GBR needs to, as far as it can, to build on and evolve the structures it's got rather than throwing them in the air. And I have to say, I'm really encouraged by the first steps of Southeastern and Southwestern Railway, using the current train company boundaries, if you like, and then integrating the Network Rail infrastructure within that. That seems to me to be a pretty encouraging, intelligent way of going forward, because you're taking existing bits. Okay, you're merging them, but you're not throwing everything up in the air at the same time. And there would be a great temptation to do that, particularly if you're sort of a designer who's never really run an organization or run a railway, not quite understanding how you should be building on what's there, but also seeking to evolve it.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And there's one of the words that you've used a couple of times that I want to come back to, because I'd considered that when I was preparing for our conversation. I was curious to know whether you felt that GBR was an evolution or a revolution. So which one is it?
Well, it needs to be an evolution, because I think revolutions have a habit of going off in very unexpected directions, and creating sort of further evolutions, and sort of then going backwards when things don't go as people expect. Yeah. And the railway is running out there 24/7.
Yeah.
So you're not actually starting something new. You're seeking to take what's there and evolve it.
Absolutely.
So it needs to be evolution. I think the risk is that politicians are sort of seeking instant change, and governments are seeking instant change, and revolution always looks if it's going to deliver that.
Exactly. But I think, to your point, and what we've seen at Southeastern and Southwestern in these early days of the integration, it's the building on what we've already got, which lends itself to that feeling of evolving. So taking what already works, enhancing where it needs enhancing, making it fit for purpose for what we're moving towards, because the world has changed. How do we reflect that? How does the industry reflect that? But evolving using the best of what we've already got and adding the new stuff on, rather than, because as you said, absolutely spot on, we can't stop the railway. We can't kind of issue a memo out that says, right, we're going to stop at midnight tonight, we're going to give ourselves X period of time, and then we'll restart it again in however many months, years, decades on, when we feel like we've got the perfect plan, because the perfect plan doesn't exist either, does it? That's kind of where evolution has to come in too.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think it's easy to forget the people who actually run the railway, the people actually, the drivers, the train managers, the signalmen, the station staff, the infrastructure maintenance staff, they're all there now.
Yeah.
They'll be doing the same jobs on the ground as they're doing now in the new organization. So they need to be, if you like, seen as the key building blocks. And they need to be they need to feel that they're part of something worthwhile and new, and that they can play a better role in and contribute more than they're doing now.
Yes.
And that's a very big challenge. And I think unless you've actually run a railway or a complex integrated industry, it's too easy to forget that.
Yes. And I think that presents such an amazing opportunity, Richard, as well, to come back to something that you said a few moments ago around the importance of having a shared language, but also a shared purpose, a common purpose about why we're here, what it is we're delivering. I think quite often, and anyone who knows me and has kind of heard me speak on this subject before, will know that I get a bit frustrated when it would appear that the railway is all about trains and infrastructure, and it's kind of, well, no, it's what are we here to do? Yes, we get people from A to B, but it's so much more than that in terms of how the railway supports the economy, adds to the social value of the communities that it serves along the network, the people-related stuff that goes on. And as you've said, these people are all there now. They're all doing their jobs now. And how does the leadership of the industry make sure that this whole change piece is delivered by the people at the sharp end in the way that it needs to be, by kind of getting everybody together and bringing together everyone in the railway for that common purpose? I don't know where you start with that one. What would your advice be?
Well, thinking about it, I mean, I think a good place to start is if you've got an existing organizational unit of, if there's a leader there who is well respected, recognized by the people who within the, try to build on that. I've been thinking back to creating a profit center within its city, Midland Cross Country. That was an entirely new organization. Both what was Midland Main Line and what was the Cross Country Network, they were both Cinderellas under BR. But there were sort of key bits of the organization that actually were going to be really important to its success. And I think fairly deliberately, we appointed to key jobs people who were already area managers, area engineers of key bits of the organization, so that their people didn't feel it was a frightening new world.
Yeah.
They were under familiar leaders who, I think in most cases, were already respected. So I think, where are the leaders now, and how do you give them the space to actually take the thing forward?
Yes.
And again, I think that's certainly happened on Southeastern, and I think there's every chance it can happen with some of the other train companies as they come into public ownership and go into a vertically integrated model. I think one of the challenges is the temptation would be to often have the train company MD as the MD of the new organization. So if you're a network rail person, you feel, well, hold on, we're second class citizens in this. And one of the things that I think is also very encouraging is one of the things Andrew Haynes has been doing up until his recent retirement, is trying to move people around, move train company people into network rail infrastructure jobs,
Yes,
and vice versa. So that you're building up a cadre of people who can got the credibility and experience to actually lead the new organizational units.
yes, absolutely. I agree that kind of the knowledge transfer piece, I think, is so important. And actually, when you think about it, it's happening now, as you say. It's part of Andrew's strategy before he retired, and I assume Jeremy Westlake is continuing with that. we should have been doing it for a long time, shouldn't we? Really, in that relation to letting each side of the industry experience what it's like on the other side of the fence. So more of those secondment opportunities. We are where we are, so it's happening now. I think we could do with a few more opportunities for people, and if you I think visibility is a challenge as well, in terms of there are a lot of people who work in the UK rail industry, although sometimes it feels like a very small sector where everybody knows everybody else. It still is possible for people not to be as visible. And so getting those opportunities, if you haven't got the visibility in front of the right people, can be quite challenging still. In relation to, you mentioned a few times, and in the book, in Changing Times and Changing Trains, you write about the realities of actually running railways day in and day out. And I'm intrigued to know in your view, what do the policymakers and the reform designers, the people who are kind of making the plans, is there a risk that they underestimate what running a railway day to day actually involves? And if so, I don't want to put words in your mouth there, Richard. So if that is a risk, how do we mitigate that risk?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt it's a big risk. I mean, you can't expect politicians or civil servants or policymakers in Whitehall to have much understanding of it, because it's not what they're recruited, trained, and developed to do. I think, I mean, it's one of the more frustrating things as a leader in the industry is always, if you've got a politician or a bit of a crisis on your back, is how you sort of diplomatically take if you like, keep the politicians at distance, but respecting their concerns, and sort of, if you like, quietly trying to take them on board with you. I mean, I always find it took several meetings with MPs in particular to get them to understand that actually you probably did know what you were doing, that you were trying to do the right things, and get them to the point where they had, if you like, some respect for you and some understanding and support of what you were trying to do. And the industry management, like most managements and most industries, is hidden to the outsiders, to the policymakers, and to customers.
Yeah.
So one of the roles of leaders is to sort of get out there to the communities that are served, and to build relationships with the politicians who might have an influence, to sort of get an understanding and a respect for what's going on, for the problems, if there are problems, and if you like, win them over, that you are genuinely and successfully addressing those problems.
Yes, I think we do see success in the network with the leaders who have realised the importance of that stakeholder engagement and management piece. And we've certainly seen this. So I've been working with the rail industry for 13 years. This week, literally, we've just celebrated our 13th anniversary of launch this week. And we have noticed, when we've been taking a job brief or an assignment for a client organisation, we talk about what skills, experience, knowledge, etc. they are looking for from the successful candidate. And I would say it was probably just prior to the pandemic, actually. So probably 2018, 2019, when we started seeing stakeholder engagement and management being recognised in the top 5 skills that they were looking for in this new leadership. Prior to that, it hadn't been on the agenda at all. But we've definitely seen quite a significant shift in terms of that particular skill set and the ability to influence. So one of the questions I had for you, and too, we have a lot of people who tune into the podcast who are young rail professionals, so they're earlier on in their career. And I wondered whether you had a view, and I'm not sure if there is an answer to this, Richard, so I'm just curious to know what your view would be. But my question around, would you advise a young leader to build depth of knowledge and experience in operations, politics, or commercial skills as a priority?
Oh, I mean, I'm afraid the answer is it needs to be all three.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
yeah, it needs to be all three.
Yeah. I had no idea at all until I started working with the rail industry how impacted it was by politics. I had no clue. So as a kind of user, as a layperson coming in, I was astounded about the level of involvement that the politicians have, about the rules that exist, that are led by people in the civil service. So it was a surprise to me. So I think the political awareness, the influencing skills linked to political awareness and stakeholder management, I feel are becoming more and more important.
I mean, it has always been the case, because I mean, when the railways were built in the 19th century, the Victorian times, there was a lot of politics, local
Yeah.
politics, business politics about, where there was a big freight opportunity or whatever. And I do remember at privatization very naively thinking, great, we're out from under the politicians, we're now privatized, we can get on with running a railway and looking after our passengers. How naive I was. And I think one of the great tragedies actually is that since privatization and since the various sort of reforms and tinkering of the structure, the abolition of the Strategic Rail Authority, the Department of Transport taking over what it did, it has become more and more driven by politics and national politics.
Yes.
And by the Department for Transport than was ever the case in British Rail days.
Yeah.
My great fear would be, and I think the big challenge is how to get the Department for Transport out from running the railway to being, a Department for Transport for all of transport for all of England. Setting policy and directives, but not telling people how to run the trains, or telling what trains to run, or how many people they can employ, or what fares they should charge, because you can't do that centrally successfully.
No. And that is indeed, I think, one of the biggest challenges. And of course, just at the end of last year, so Christmas Eve, I think officially, Alex Hines became the new chief exec of the DFTO. So I think that challenge sits firmly on Alex's list of things to do, and we wish him well with that.
Absolutely.
Coming back to the leadership piece, Richard, if you're looking ahead 5 or 10 years, in your view, what will separate railway leaders who thrive in the GBR era from those who will struggle? So what skills or mindsets will matter more than ever?
I think one of the things which we haven't talked about so much is building a strong team.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think those people who are able to draw together people from a range of different backgrounds, whether they're existing industry players or bringing people in from other sectors, and welding them into a team where there's respect and collaboration and some fun for the team, I think is going to be a key skill. And if you've then got a team with a range of skills, a range of backgrounds, and you give them the freedom to do their jobs and the support when they need it, you'll have a high performing railway.
Yes, I agree. It sounds so easy when you say it like that.
Part of that is, if we talk about the stakeholder bit, I think the importance of communications in running a railway was something that it took quite a long time for me to understand the importance of it. But really good comms directors who can line up the occasions where as the leader you need to engage with communities and stakeholders, or with the media, or with your own people, they're key roles, but of course they're not really traditional roles in a lot of organizations.
No.
And you have a good comms director and a good team, then you're beginning to really motor. But that's not the only skill, but I mean it's one of the key skills I think that is going to be important.
Yeah.
Now some of that is it's blowing your own trumpet, celebrating success, demonstrating that you are tackling problems and improving things for passengers if it's a passenger railway.
Yeah.
But that's quite important. If you don't tell people about your successes, that people will think you're just a rather stolid, uninspiring, not very successful management team.
Absolutely. I think, and this is purely anecdotal and my kind of lens on the world, I think we're getting better at this. So again, I kind of, I'm known to get my soapbox out, Richard, in relation to my belief that the industry could be so much better at promoting itself. So that's looking at it very much from a talent attraction and acquisition piece. So whether that's for us at the senior end of the career spectrum, or whether it's encouraging people at school leavers, at apprenticeships, for graduates to consider the UK rail industry as a career. We've just not been good enough at talking about what a fantastic career opportunity it provides for you. And I mean, you are a poster person for that. And obviously, when you came in, you had a sense of it was somewhere that you could build a career. But I don't think that that's obvious to people now when they do the milk round, when they consider where they want to go and work. I think that and certainly, so my daughter's peer group, so she graduated last year, so they're early 20s. And if I say to them, what about the railway, when they're considering a job, I immediately will get, well, I don't want to drive a train, or I don't want to sell tickets. I don't want to do that. And there is a lack of understanding, I think, generally, that there are so many more roles in the industry that we need people to do, other than the very important jobs of selling tickets and driving trains, but so much that goes on in the background, in the supporting functions to actually make that happen. So communications, absolutely. And I think we are getting better. Even just this morning, actually, I saw the Rail Business Daily newsletter, which lands in my inbox every morning. There's a whole article around DFTO, around the 7 TOCs that are already in public ownership and the different achievements under each of them. So they get a paragraph each in terms of what's happening and what the plans are and what the progress has been. So I think I'm seeing little tiny green shoots, Richard, and we're not into a big tree yet, but we've got some little tiny green shoots coming through, which is encouraging.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, just putting in perspective, I don't think the industry has ever been very good at this. It is an opportunity to to actually do rather better than has ever been done in the past.
Yes. I think I've seen another shift as well, just coming from my own perspective on this, in the last 13 years of providing talent into the industry. What we've noticed is, again, quite a significant shift in the willingness to consider candidates from outside sector. I remember the very first job brief that I took, and I won't name any names, but I suggested that in the shortlist, which would be typically 4 or 5 people in the shortlist for interview, how would you feel about having people in there with no rail experience? And I got this sharp intake of breath and this facial expression which said, what on earth are you talking about? Why on earth would we consider anyone who wasn't from the rail industry? They need to understand the complexity of it. You can't just waltz in and, kind of think that you can just come and work in the rail industry. We're now in the very happy position as a small business of having 54% of the people that we've placed into senior roles in the industry who have come from outside sector. So there's actual data there. There's evidence that say that the current leaders of the rail industry are open to the fact that other industry sectors might have things that we can learn from. So I find that really encouraging and really positive.
And it's really important. I mean, I think British Rail was really bad at it. It was a very inwards-looking culture. You didn't get to senior management full stop unless you'd had quite a long career in the industry.
Yes.
And I suppose I began to learn that with privatization. And it was the biggest lesson I probably took from Eurostar, that, you know, some of our best people weren't railway people.
Right.
But you need good railway people as well, and you need that blend. All railway people is disastrous because it's very inward looking, not very innovative. All non-railway people is a disaster because it won't work.
Yes.
You need a blend. And I used to compare it to a heart transplant operation, where, you know, if you're the surgeon, you need to select the heart to match
Yes.
the tissue, the blood group, etc.
Yeah.
And you now need to manage the post-operative acceptance to make sure the organ's not rejected.
Absolutely.
And there is an art when you do recruit people and appoint them from outside the industry. You do need to give them you need to support their education, if you like, as to how the railway works.
Yes.
And not in a patronizing way, as some people might do. You know, it is, and you need to be thinking about, is this, when you're recruiting, is this person somebody who is likely to be able to grasp and respect the complexity and the day-to-day realities of the industry and cope with it, rather than somebody who say, well, this is all too difficult, or it's such a bad culture that I can't be getting on with it.
Yes. We always say when we're doing our exec search, me and my team are always looking for pioneers. We know through experience that we are looking for people who are open to change, will embrace the opportunity to be part of change, will bring their own thoughts and their own experience to challenge, because sometimes we're doing things because we've been doing them for 200 years in some cases, but, you know, we're just the ability to ask a question of why are we doing it like that, but asking that question in the right way, with the right respect and the right acknowledgement that it has worked for a long time, but there might be things that we can do slightly differently now, which might make it more fit for purpose. But having that, acknowledging that there is a huge amount of success and achievement already happened, but there are things that people from outside the industry can bring. And I love the word blend, and I completely agree with you. We need to have a blend of the outside experience and the inside knowledge. Absolutely. One of the things that you said earlier in our conversation, Richard, that a number of my guests have said when they talk about their career, is that they had managers early on who were willing to take a risk, who were willing to give them some leeway, some rope, enough rope to say, go and have a go. You might not be quite ready yet, but I think you might be. I'm going to stretch you. I'm going to have the ability to stretch yourself into this. From your view of the industry now, have we still got the ability to do that? Or have we gone too far the other way in terms of we're so risk averse that no, you can't, you've got to prove 100 times that you can do it before I'll let you do it?
I mean, the honest answer to that is I don't really know, because, you know, I've been retired for several years, so I don't have that contact, but I do worry that is a concern. And I think particularly the issue of risk is quite important to it. And I think also it's because of the industry has become very siloed, even within Network Rail, it's very siloed, but you've got TOCs, you've got leasing companies. There's about 3 or 4 different layers of regulation with the ORR, the RAIB, RSSB, all of whom sort of have semi-regulatory impact. Sorry, I forgot my train of thought on it.
Difficult to take risks. And
yes, exactly. But it means that managers are not. Yes, thank you. Managers are not in a position to to sort of take risks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that is horrible. And I have, having met a number of people through Young Rail Professionals, for instance, I sense that quite a lot of them are frustrated with their career progress, and I think that's partly because they're not being challenged and stretched.
Yes.
Because that's not how things are done these days. So I think it is a real problem, and I think yes, changing the institutional approach to risk and giving managers the scope to be able to put somebody in a role and take a risk on them, I think is going to be quite an important ingredient to success.
Yes, yeah, I agree. Completely agree. I think it's understandable. We've kind of we've a brilliant reputation and history now in terms of safety on the railway. So understandably, we're very risk aware and risk averse. So, but that I think has seeped into areas where it's kind of, I think, critical that we start to just stretch that a little bit in certain areas, not where any safety is concerned, obviously, but just being able to recognise that people are ready to move in terms of their career progression, ready to try something different, ready to do something different, perhaps, for the industry. Thank you for sharing your views on that. There isn't an answer, is there? But I was interested in your perspective on it, having benefited in your career from people taking a risk on you.
I mean, I think, it didn't really affect me, but I mean, British Rail was actually quite good at when people came out of management training, whether they were a graduate or an internal appointment. They were put through supervisory junior management jobs, which were fairly low risk in terms of, if they didn't perform, they weren't going to upset the industry or the industry's performance.
Yeah.
And I think trying to create roles which can be used as development for young people as a testing ground, and if they don't succeed at it, you find another role for them.
Yeah.
But so that they can rapidly develop their skills and experience. I think that should be part of the organizational design thing. And again, I think, if you're a, dare I say it, civil servant sitting down trying to design the thing, that probably doesn't even enter your consciousness.
No. Let's hope they listen to this conversation. I'm going to ask you one final question before we bring our conversation to a close. If you were writing the next chapter of your book in 2030, so we're another kind of 5 years on, and you're doing an update to Changing Times, Changing Trains, what would you hope to be able to say about how GBR has changed UK railway in that period of time?
Gosh, I would hope to be able to say that both the reality and the perception of performance and delivery to passengers, generally, probably not across the country, but in most places, had improved. That communities felt a stronger sense of ownership of their bit of the railway than they did.
Yeah.
I would certainly hope that the industry had reduced its net cost to the taxpayer significantly as a result of the reforms.
Yeah.
I think we underestimate, and too many people in the industry underestimate, the strategic importance of that. So yeah, those would be some hopes, and I suppose the hope also would be that the industry had successfully won the confidence of Whitehall and politicians to be left to run the industry with much more freedom than it enjoyed for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Richard, that is music to my ears, and I very much hope to be buying the updated version of your book in 5 years' time, and you having your final chapter saying that your wishes, your vision that you set out on the Intuitive Insights podcast at the beginning of 2026 has come to fruition. And we can tick all of those boxes, because I think that sounds like a successful outcome from my perspective, certainly. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm hugely appreciative of you making the time to join me and to share some of your knowledge and your wisdom and your story. And I would absolutely recommend that anybody who has any interest in the UK Railway at all gets themselves a copy of your book, Changing Times, Changing Trains, so Memoirs and Insights on Running Railways. I loved it. I'm not a railway person throughout my career. I've a passion about it now, having worked with the industry for 13 years. I loved the book. I learnt so much, and it really fed my passion for how we can make changes to make it better in the future. So for now, my thanks to you, Richard Brown, for joining me on the Intuitive Insights podcast.
It's a pleasure. No, thank you. And I wish you every success with your continuing role in bringing people into the industry. I think it's a really important part of the ecosystem. So I wish you every success, Nita.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard. What an interesting gentleman. Thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, and I really hope that you did too. Quite a challenge for me to pick out just 3 key takeaways from that conversation with Richard. But here goes. These are mine. I'd love to hear yours. Firstly, if Great British Railways is to succeed, it needs to be an evolution, not a revolution. We have to build on what already exists whilst the railway keeps running 24/7. Secondly, structure alone won't deliver change. The hard work is the culture, creating a shared language, a shared purpose, and empowering local leadership so that people feel part of something, not done to. And thirdly, the leaders who thrive in the GBR era will be the ones who can build brilliant teams, who can communicate progress clearly and navigate the political reality of UK rail, all at the same time whilst earning the confidence for the industry to be trusted to run with more freedom. I'm sure that's something that we can all look forward to with enthusiasm. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, Richard. You've been a brilliant guest. And please do join me next time on the Intuitive Insights podcast, where the next episode will be with Angie Doll, Chief Exec of GTR. For now, thank you.